This meeting is being recorded.
Hello and welcome to the Social Enterprise Mark Coffee Morning. So this is our March coffee morning and we are absolutely delighted to be talking about scale up and scale out today. And this is really around growth options for social enterprises. I do have an apology to make. I know that we have one or two people in our audience today who are maybe suffering with a few COVID symptoms. Unfortunately, Lucy has been struck down, so she won't be able to join us today. Sends her deepest apologies, but her best wishes to everybody as well. So we are going to skip over the donut economy small sort of preface that Lucy was going to give us today. But we do feel that maybe that might be a further future session for us to cover separately. So thank you all very, very much for coming along today. We are absolutely delighted to have some expert speakers who are going to talk to us about the growth options for social enterprise. And we're really looking at the parallels across the life cycle of a social enterprise as it goes from startup to sustainability to scale and grow, and how in parallel to that, those are key stages where we need to perhaps be looking at social finance, social investment, and we are delighted that we've got some real insights from both sides of the fence from the social investment perspective. And then also that linkage as we go across those life cycle stages of how accreditation as a social enterprise can also support you in that messaging and in those growth stages. So first of all, a very quick invitation to say hello to Dren, who's on the Social Enterprise Mark team. Dren is our marketing administrator, so many of you will know him from a few communications if you are on our mailing list or if you are a Mark holder. So hello to Dren. Dren's going to very kindly be managing the chat for us, so please do feel free, pop your questions into the chat, pop your own perhaps LinkedIn profiles into the chat if you'd like to connect. And also we'll be drawing out any of those questions for open Q&A towards the end. My name is Sally Ryan. I'm the current Business Development Manager and Marketing Manager at Social Enterprise Mark. Rachel will be returning from maternity leave come June, and Sophie will be returning from the marketing maternity leave. She has just had a baby daughter and she'll be returning at the end of the year. So you have me for a few months yet. I'm excuse me, absolutely delighted that we have a couple of other very, very qualified people to be part of this sort of social investment growth stage option conversation. And I'd like to introduce Julius, who's from Second Shot Coffee. Julius, would you like to just do a little intro, tell us a tiny bit about social enterprise? You came as Mark holder in 2019.
That's right. Yeah. So morning everyone, my name's Julius. I run Second Shot Coffee. So we're a specialty coffee social enterprise that trains and employs people affected by homelessness. So yeah, we've been going since 2016 with our first shop in Bethnal Green, which we sadly just closed. And we have a second shop in Marylebone that's been going since 2019. Recently joined as a Mark holder, which has had a big impact for us as well as we kind of transitioned into selling beans online, and also now towards moving towards office spaces as well as commercial public facing venues as well. In terms of our funding, we launched with SITR, so that's kind of our funding background, where I can talk a bit about the process or some of the challenges that we had there. But just happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Fantastic, thank you, Julius, and we really appreciate it, because you're probably thinking, hang on, the coffee shop's open. I need to be there. I need to make sure everything's kind of like going on.
No, sorry, we've got the WhatsApp going.
We'd also like to welcome Kate Welsh. So Kate is from Social Enterprise Acumen up in the in the north of England. And Kate, you've really been involved in social investment as a kind of grant giver, supporting organisations to look at accessing social investment, as well as receiving social investment yourself.
Yes, hello everyone, and delighted to be here. And also very proud to be a Social Enterprise Mark Ambassador, because we've held the mark for quite a number of years. So joy and delight to be part of today's session. So I'm a bit of a serial social entrepreneur. I counted up, it's 17 actually, if I must confess. Either madness or something of the sort. So my first social enterprise was actually Acumen Development Trust, and we took social investments to start a plant nursery to give employment to people coming out of prison. So that was our first kind of venture. And we didn't take social investment when the housing market fell apart through Future Builders some years ago. So had some experience that way. I now run Social Enterprise Acumen, which is really about supporting other people to look at how to develop, grow social enterprises. And we're a provider of support. So we've worked with things like the Reach Fund to help other people. We self-finance to get going. In those days, that was fairly easy. And I have no ambition to get too big, because I've already run through the Development Trust. We grew to over 3 million and 80 staff. And I don't know that I really want to get back there now. I'm getting older. So I have my views on that. And behind me, for those who might not have noticed, in the background is the old rectory in Houghton Spring, just between Sunderland and Durham, and that's a community asset transfer from the Sunderland Council, a Grade 2 star listed building. And we're very much about being a community anchor, so really interested here. We haven't yet raised social investment. We've been fortunate to take some, be able to get some grant funding as a heritage building, but we want to buy this from the council, so that will be our next venture. I have also sat on the board of the North East Social Investment Company, which is a joint venture with Big Society Capital and a legacy fund in the North East with Northern Rock Foundation. So being on that side, as well as being on the board of the Community Foundation and Greg's the Bakers Foundation Trust for a number of years. So hopefully I might be able to give some different perspectives, which I'm looking forward to doing.
Very wide-ranging, and I think the contrast between Julius and Second Shot Coffee as an earlier start business started by a young entrepreneur, and also very much a B2C business, will contrast really interestingly, obviously, with the Social Enterprise Acumen and your background, Kate. So I think, you know, great that, as I say, we can look at it from very, very diverse sectors here. And our final speaker today is Ishita, who is with us from Good Finance and also Big Society Capital. So I think the really interesting thing, Ishita, is not only your role within the social investment side of things, but also you are a social entrepreneur in your own right. So again, you see things from both sides of the fence.
I like to think that I can. Thanks, Sally. And I apologise in advance if I drop off or freeze today. My laptop is just not behaving itself this morning. But yeah, my name is Ishita. I'm the Senior Project Manager over at Good Finance. And those of you that haven't come across us before, Good Finance is all about just making the world of social investment more accessible. We're funded and supported by Big Society Capital and the Access Foundation. But for the past couple of years, have also been running my own social enterprise alongside Good Finance. We started up in the first lockdown in March 2020, which feels like a lifetime ago now. And we were just responding to the pandemic and to emerging needs in our communities, mainly serving vulnerable ethnic minority people across the UK. Since then, we have sort of adapted and grown our work. So alongside delivering community programs and services, also do research and consultancy for charities in the UK looking to improve on anti-racism and how they practice anti-racism. So running that alongside being Good Finance's project manager for the past couple of years, sort of two hats on, feet in both worlds, thinking about social finance and social investment some days, and then other days, very aware of how challenging all things finance can be for when you're running a small social enterprise.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ishita. That's great. And as I say, feel free as we go through sort of Q&As, anybody, sort of ask Ishita either from the Good Finance, Big Society Capital perspective or from the sort of solo entrepreneur perspective, if you so wish. So I think the context for, particularly around the social investment side of it, we have very recently had the SEUK Commission for Social Investment from Lord Adebola. And that really focused in on a couple of key recommendations about the refocusing on social enterprises and the need for flexible finance. And Peter Holbrook sort of says, this is really quite essential, and we're sort of looking at that reform piece. And the need for patient capital when we're looking for social investment. And I think some of those things are really a reflection of Big Society Capital. You've been around for quite a few years now, but it was quite a new social investment initiative when it started, looking at dormant accounts and bringing that money into the social enterprise sector. So it's kind of perhaps a natural stage as well around the investment market that we look at actually how this evolves as market needs change. So have you sort of within Big Society Capital and within Good Finance, have you noticed sort of like a change of trends aside from obviously sort of a changing need around the last couple of years from the COVID sort of implications for social enterprises? Perhaps Ishita, if you could have a brief view on that, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, of course. I mean, yeah, we've noticed lots of changes, and it is very much a growing and developing market in the UK. And the needs of social entrepreneurs have changed over the years, but also the strategic priorities and aims of Big Society Capital also, as they've learned and grown and developed, those have slowly but surely changing over the years as well. So we do actually see kind of the average first-time demand for social investment. I think a lot of the stories that you hear about are of organisations that have taken 10 million or 20 million in big scary numbers, but actually average first-time demand is around £50,000. And quite often it is small social enterprises looking to grow or maintain and fill gaps in their cash flow. Definitely seeing a demand for more patient and more flexible finance, and the Access Foundation is doing some great work in that space, looking at more flexible funding options. I think the need for more patient capital is very, very clear, and that has been heard loud and clear by investors. And I do think it's something that they are already starting to respond to. I think little things that we saw over the last 2 years do sort of highlight that social investment is a very different space. So I think the way that social investors responded to the pandemic with the Resilience and Recovery Loan Fund was a really good example of social investors coming together to kind of collaborate and get that fund up and running, and the impact that that's had on organisations throughout the pandemic has been really, really great to see. But yeah, definitely, I think we actually, there was a session that we did internally at BSC the other day, really diving deeper into the recommendations from the report and thinking about how we're going to respond to it. And I think that need for patient capital has definitely been heard loud.
So the report's been a sort of a good positive challenge to the social investor sector. In terms of we all need to kind of reflect, don't we, and go, are we actually being responsive to market needs? And certainly I feel, sort of working within the social enterprise sector, the Good Finance portal has got some amazing resources, and they are very, very responsive and very up to date in terms of whether it's people breaking down those barriers for people to actually have confidence to understand the language of social investment, which can be super scary, if we take on a mortgage in a personal perspective often, and think that that's a relatively normal next step for us as we go through sort of life and adulthood. But actually starting a business, and sort of coming to Julius in just a moment, you start a business, especially something like a coffee shop, you've kind of got to dive straight in there almost from the investment perspective. So just before I ask Julius to respond to that question, maybe just a little quick hands up across everybody here that's with us today. Who's actually taken social investment already? Okay, fabulous. And I guess others, quick hands up, who's actually sort of here because they're thinking about taking investment, but they're kind of like maybe not quite sure how to go about it, not quite sure what type of investment is available to them, or have concerns about taking on social investment. So we have a few there as well. So thank you for that. So Julius, help break down some of those confidence barriers. Tell us a little bit, if you would, about the background for Second Shot Coffee, when you started, kind of age-wise. So you're a younger person when you took on, you started your social enterprise and you sort of had to look at investment. Was there a sort of a confidence thing about, oh, hang on, have I got the right numbers stacked up in my business to apply for this investment as a younger person? Perhaps a little less business experience behind you to kind of go, this is what I need to do, it's the right thing for my business. So can you give us a sort of a snapshot of, I guess, your circumstances and background when you're looking at that?
Yeah, so we finally opened in 2016. I say finally because so I was at university in my second year. I was part of an organization called Enactus, which was amazing, and I still love it. And I'm still we've actually got like a national expo, is it next week, which I'll be part of, which is amazing. But basically what you do is you launch social enterprises and social impact projects while you're at university. So I was doing that, I loved it, and realized that that's what I wanted to, you know, keep doing and focus my time on. So I suspended my studies after that second year to work on the idea of getting Second Shot off the ground. And so yeah, I'm 19. I don't have any like connections in like social enterprise funding or you know, the personal connections for funding, or, you know, experience in the industry. So yeah, it was all new to me, but I kind of had the confidence that if I could get it open, I could make it a success. But then the first stage of that was the funding, which was super difficult for me. So we went through loads of different options before we ended up with SITR and being able to get the funding that we needed. Did a crowdfunding campaign straight off the bat on Indiegogo, which I say now was super successful in every way, except we didn't get any actual money. We only made like 7 grand or something. We got some good press, and from that made some good connections, and actually met a guy who introduced social investment tax relief to me. And so if you don't know, this is a scheme where you can either raise equity or loan. I did a loan, and your investors get 30% of the value of what they invest as tax relief. So it's kind of an added incentive. And so yeah, that's how we ended up getting funded. I did try and get onto a bunch of kind of different grant programs and things like that at the time as well beforehand. But, you know, when I look back on it now, I can totally understand how you've got, you know, this basically 19-year-old kid who says he's going to do all these things and you know, but has never done them before. So yeah, we didn't get onto any of those. So STL was a good option for us, where, you know, I had to put the pitch deck together, did a presentation to a firm of independent financial advisors. They liked it. They took Second Shot on board as part of their advice portfolio and sent out to their clients. And then from that presentation, within a month and a half, we had all the money. And then maybe a month later, we finally opened in Bethnal Green. So I definitely think SITR is something that works to an extent. It is difficult because, for example, part of our process, none of our investors had ever heard about it, or the independent financial advisors. So part of our role was also to kind of educate and inform them exactly how the process is going to work, but also reassure them that the process does work. And, you know, so that's a bit of a challenge. And then just logistically, you're not allowed to do financial promotions. So that's kind of hard if you don't already have the networking connections to actually access the investors and you know, get in front of them. But yeah, no, I think as well over time it's definitely got a lot easier, the actual process and form filling and admin and stuff like that. And yeah, we did a second round of SITR when we opened our second shop, and that was, you know, super smooth.
So is it almost scarier applying for the investment, or was it scarier actually getting the investment and thinking, oh heck, I've got to kind of make this good now?
I would say, well, for me, it was beforehand. I think I was pretty confident, although, you know, look back now and you know, made millions of mistakes, but I had kind of built that into how much we were looking for, because I understood that, you know, I was probably going to be making some mistakes along the way and wanted to have that extra cushion. And the good thing about SATR as well is it's because it's longer term. So ours was 4 years. I felt like I had plenty of time to figure out and kind of make it work. Yeah, the only actually on the kind of it being long term there as well, I'd say kind of one of the negatives would be that because you can't pay it back earlier, so you're sitting with that debt on your books for that period of time. But no, in terms of it being scary, yeah, definitely beforehand and just trying to get in front of the right people, I think.
Okay, thank you. So maybe I could bring Ishtar in at this stage, because I think the wide range of social investment kind of products that are available, and Julius has mentioned one there, the social investment tax relief, SITAR. If you've got sort of just a very quick scope of like maybe the main investment sort of products that are available, but also what from a social investor perspective, or a brokerage perspective, what are you kind of looking for in those applications? What will kind of help give people today that confidence to go, maybe it's not as scary as I think it is?
Yeah, of course. I was smiling as Julius was speaking, because Julius and I actually met at university through Actus. Knew him way back when, before Second Shot was what it is today. So it's been incredible to see how you've grown that, Julius. But yeah, so most social investment products, and there are so many of them, and it's really important to say that I don't believe that there's anyone out there that knows every single one and the details and technicalities of every single one. So it's okay that you don't, but they broadly fall into 2 categories, which is debt and equity. So debt is essentially taking on money and paying it back with interest, and equity is essentially taking on money and giving up a proportion of your organization in order to be able to do that. I mean, that's probably a very crude way of just describing it, but essentially they all sort of either fall into one of those camps, they're debt and equity. Sometimes they're a combination of the two, and sometimes they're different combinations of things. So sometimes you'll hear us say things like blended capital, which can mean something like part of it is repayable and part of it is grant that you don't have to repay. So, you know, broadly, they fall into one of those 2 camps. But I would say there's probably probably between 30 to 40 different types of social investment. And one thing that I would really recommend doing is on the Good Finance website, there's a little diagnostic tool called Is It Right For Us? And you go through and you answer a couple of questions about your legal structure, what kind of money you're looking for, how much, for how long, what it's for. And it will tell you which of those products could be right for you, because it's probably true that there is going to be more than one type that could be the right fit for you. And then it's kind of a bit of a puzzle then working out which type you need, which type of investor you need to go to. And the diagnostic tool is a really good way, you know, it's a really good starting point. And then I think in terms of sort of communicating with investors and what investors are looking for is a couple of things. So one, really important to remember that the vast majority of social investment is not benevolent finance, which means that you do have to pay it back in some way, shape or form. And so what investors are looking for is your revenue model and your income stream. So whether that's trading, donations, services, contracts, and being really clear, you know, how you're going to pay that money back is a very strong starting point. Also being very clear on what you're taking that money for. So there tend to be like a couple of, you know, recurring reasons where we see social investment working really well, but always having real clarity over the purpose of the money, what it's going towards, and the impact that's going to make on your organization. And then I would say a final really big one is social investors. So 85% of them that we have listed on the Good Finance Investor Directory are themselves charities and social enterprises. And something that's really important to them is to really understand your social impact. So what is it? how are you making it, how are you measuring it, how are you managing it? And that is really, really important to be able to communicate with a social investor, because unlike mainstream investors, they are really going to care about that, because it's part of their social mission. The vast majority are charity social enterprises themselves. So I would say those three things. Why are you taking on the money? What is it for? How are you going to pay it back? And what is the impact that you make, and how is it going to help you make that impact?
Okay, that's really useful and interesting, and I guess that sort of does link with our accreditation standards as well for social enterprises, because obviously we look at that impact evidence from an accreditation perspective, but actually going through accounts and asking for evidence and information that we can see that reinvestment of profit back into those stated social environmental aims. So that's a really interesting linkage, and obviously that differs at different life stages. So as an early startup, we have limited evidence, we might have limited access to funding, we certainly perhaps have limited accounts information available, and as we go through that sort of startup into sustainable growth, which is where most of our social enterprise mark holders that are accredited are at, we perhaps want different types of finance for different reasons. So those 3 pointers are really important. And I wonder, Kate, if sort of to bring you in, because you've really sort of gone through, as you say, with sort of a number of social enterprises that you've started up, and a number that you work with to help them be ready for investment, regardless of their stage of business life cycle. So could you maybe sort of help us draw some parallels across, you know, the sort of the life stage within the business cycle, the kind of the different types of investment that are available, the different kind of amounts that we might be kind of looking at, the concern, confidence about going for investment, and actually how that impacts measurement and evidencing, and therefore accreditation. I think your perspective from a whole rounded view would be really interesting for us today.
Yeah, perhaps, and perhaps if I give you some examples as well, that might be helpful. So I think I might add one other thing to what Ishta said about what investors are looking for, which is also that they invest in people, that they want the people running the organisation to be those committed people that they feel they can place their trust in. I think very particularly, you know, I know Julius until today, but you talked about a pitch, you've really got to sell what you're doing to people. So there has to be, and whenever we help people at startup stage, we're always trying to understand, they have the passion for the social cause and the difference they want to make in society, but you've got to get to the business level. So we're always pushing people to get to that point of saying, well, where is that regular and strong income stream, as Ishta talked about, going to come from? So one very simple example, we had a fairly new community interest company, so social enterprise, limited by guarantee, and we've talked about legal structures. The legal structure will limit the way in which you can actually bring finance in. But as a company limited by guarantee, it has to be debt. And they wanted to buy a property, but they really had, I think they'd won a business planning competition. They had about £5,000 from doing that, and they'd run some pilot projects. So they weren't really up and running to any great extent, but what they had done is they built trust with the people who were going to pay them income. And their model was about providing alternative education to young people excluded from schools. And that's reasonably lucrative in the sense that if you're on a framework, money will flow, but it wasn't enough to convince the investor, in this case, Key Fund, who are a social enterprise retail investor, which is great. What they were doing was buying a building which was an old pub. They wanted to raise about £120,000. So when we're talking about sizes, under 150,000 is a sort of a place where quite a lot of those early stage investors will happily support. They were able to have an anchor tenant for that building. So that assured income with the signed lease agreement for that anchor tenant, which had to be a church, enabled them to show the ability to replay repay the debt alongside the work that they were actually doing as a social enterprise, which was true social impact. So it's a bit of a blended business model, because some of it would be payment for the work they did, some of it would be rent into the actual building. And they were able to benefit from one of those blended finance models where Access Foundation had a growth fund. So some of the money was grants, some of it was debt, but effectively it meant almost in essence they were not actually having to pay a lot of interest, because the grant component, if you like, reduced the amount of interest payable. And they were able to secure that at a really early stage in their development, and that building is now open, running and functioning. So I think nobody should be afraid of talking to an investor at an early stage. I suppose if there's one other thing I want to say around it is, this is a two-way street. A lot of people are kind of, oh, well, we've got a potential kind of social investor that might want to work with us. And then they find themselves caught, and it's a marketplace. You can choose a different investor if you want to. And I think that's important, that it's about the relationship with the two, where it fits. What does things like the Mark help with? Well, the Mark massively helps, because if you think about where we're going with the Mark, we're saying you ought to be getting at least 50% of your income through trading. I appreciate somebody mentioned about, if you've got strong donations, that might work, but they might be a little bit more variable. And certainly people who are more in charitable space and dependent, a lot of them lost income during COVID, for example, if they were in events and fundraising. That might not be as secure a model as some of the business models, but that definite revenue streams that are coming through trading, being able to not only show what you want to achieve, but demonstrate that social impact is important. But there are some investors that will, if you like, back your intention to work with people in the same way that I think happened for Julius. Yes, absolutely, our intention is to support homeless people, thereby you've got a clear space in social impact terms. So I think what I would always say to people is talk to somebody else who's been before you. There's some great case studies on good finance. There's been a series of events that have been running where you get that chance to talk to somebody who's been through it beforehand. Talk to people like us who are sort of providers of support, because there's actually often, so Reach funding, for example, and there's a new pot of Reach funding, can help you if you've got your initial business plan, but you want to do some really demonstrable financial forecasting and demonstrate your case to the investors. It lets you go the next level. So you might get experts like us, and there's lots of others around the country that can help you actually make that case as well. But you've got to be passionate about it. You've got to sell what you do, because those investors want to believe in you.
Thank you, Kate. That's really helpful. And I think Julius, you've sort of used the accreditation mark very much as part of your growth and investment plans, haven't you?
Yeah, that's right. So we had the 2 coffee shops, and it wasn't until the pandemic where we started actually selling our beans online. So where that's a slightly different market, and it's people, customers who might not necessarily have experienced second shop, in the flesh, trying to communicate exactly how important our mission is to us and exactly what we do, and telling that full story to people who won't have experienced it for themselves. Having the market is super important to be able to, I guess, have that extra level of credibility as well in, convincing people that your story is genuine and that you're, having the impact that you're saying you're having. So that on the customer side, but then also I think definitely in terms of side and securing different events. So in the past we've done coffee catering for some huge events like TEDx. We've done some stuff with Facebook and Google. And so, yeah, being able to secure those kinds of events, and also corporate contracts, which we're starting to do now. Yeah, the mark's super important, again, just to reiterate in terms of that credibility piece, and yeah, in having those kinds of conversations. So it's definitely helped us a lot.
Yeah, we really appreciate that, and I think the sort of how both Kate and Julius, you've kind of described how important it is to have this kind of like linkage as you scale and grow your businesses. I guess a sort of a question to all 3 of our experts in their own field, and Ishita, feel free to answer this from a social entrepreneur perspective if you wish, or both sides. Kind of what are the what are the key challenges, and how do people actually kind of consider overcoming those challenges to look at accessing investment or getting the right understanding the right investment? I think, Kate, you sort of touched on it, you know, speak to people, go ask people that have taken investment, who perhaps they're social enterprises that you admire, you aspire to, kind of thing. We're a very collaborative sector overall, but so what are the challenges, and how do we actually overcome them? How do we help people access good investment at the right time and for the right reasons? Open to all.
It's a really, really good question, Sally. I think from my personal perspective, one of the biggest challenges is capacity. I think the reality of being a social entrepreneur, running a social enterprise, the day-to-day, and also thinking about funding, finance, but also the longer term, the strategic perspective, it is a lot to balance. And one of the constant challenges, I think, is capacity. And you know, we've been down this path now where there's no easy answer. You know, generating revenue is difficult. Getting clients is difficult. Getting grant funding is difficult. Getting social investment is difficult. There is no kind of simple solution or easy answer. There's no, I wish there was, but there really isn't. And I feel like just capacity, and then, you know, the added challenges of how do I navigate the space? How do I understand it? It takes time to build relationships. It takes time to make good connections, or to really get a pitch down. And it is really challenging, but I think that, you know, we also do live in an ecosystem where there is lots of support, and there are resources and there are things available. And so I think, you know, things like Access's Reach Fund, which really, really kind of speaks to that need around capacity in particular. The Access Reach Fund is one that I always suggest that people who are in that early stage of trying to work out, is social investment right for me? Is this the right path? Could this realistically be something? Yes, I think it could be, but God, how do I have the capacity to do the due diligence, to do everything around it? Always suggest they look at Access's Reach Fund. And then, you know, look at where support exists. So is that from within your board? Is that from within your own staff? But really, how do you build the capacity in order to take on the finance to build more capacity? And that seems to me one of the recurring challenges. But yeah, Kate, Julius, keen to hear what you think as well.
Yeah, I would totally just echo that. And that was one of the things that I was thinking in terms of it being the right timing, but also, yeah, having that capacity, because absolutely, I couldn't agree more in terms of how difficult it is and the time you need to put in, and you know, you need to be on top of so many different areas. And when we did our first round of funding, you know, we weren't open, so I had all that time. And then second time round, it was definitely super important that we were in a place that I could, you know, completely trust in all my staff and not have to be there, and not having to worry when I'm not there, you know. And then we also had operations managers kind of running the day-to-day, so I could more focus on this kind of longer term thinking funding. So having that kind of built-in capacity to the business where you can focus the time on it was super helpful for me. And then, yeah, I would also just agree with what you're saying about there is a lot of support out there if you try and access it. You know, there's pro bono support, there's different programs that you can apply for. Also, you mentioned having a board as well. That was something that was new to me. We got a non-executive board 2020, I think, end of 2020. So before that, it was just me, and just so having that extra people to bounce ideas off and stuff, but also work together on, you know, different documents, different forecasts and things, and kind of building out your capacity as a business that way, I think was super helpful. But yeah, making sure that you're ready and it's the right timing, and that you're being really realistic with what you can achieve in your week, I think, yeah, it's super key.
Thank you, Julius. And Kate, I think you wanted to come in as well, didn't you?
Well, I was just going to say, let me chip in to say there is another potential helpful product from Access Fund through the social investment business, which is the Enterprise Development Fund. Now that's only available in windows for different groups. So there has Homeless Link's been a partner for homeless organisations. There's a mental health theme. There's a Black and minorities ethnic-led organisations theme through the Bailey Initiative. So you might not be the right sector, right type of organisation, but if you keep your eyes open for that, enterprise development has been very helpful. There are also some access invested areas, the 6 around the country. So in the Northeast, we have one, Local Access, Redcar, Cleveland and Hartlepool, which are investments into a biggish place, in our case, sort of 2 local authority areas, which has a mix of enterprise development money, business development money, if you like, so that sense of being able to get that initial capacity, and that's grants usually, to get you to the point of being able to develop the ideas into at least a reasonably formed plan, and that will help you to then look at again, potentially the blended finance models. But as I say, talk to people like, I mean, we're just relatively tiny, but we just say we'll give an hour free to anybody, come and have a chat and then see what we can do. And there is that support around. And I think just be open to possibilities. You might have other particular connections. There are investors that are interested in types of organisations. For example, there's one organisation that looks at long-term capital for buildings that's happens to be called the Kingdom Bank, interested in Christian organisations, for example. A lot of charities that look for accommodation officers have gone down that route. So there will be something that is fit for purpose for you. Some of that you'll find it on Good Finance, others you'll find from talking to perhaps somebody that's gone down a similar route to you, because they'll have found something that worked for them. But don't be afraid. I think there is a big fear factor. And perhaps if I chip one other thing in, there are a lot of organisations that are longer and more established, particularly say charitable structures, that just are fearful of investment because they've lived in a world of grants up till now, and we've created some dark grant dependencies in areas. So in the Northeast, we had masses of money from Northern Rock Foundation till it disappeared when the bank went bust effectively, and then that grant disappeared, and we're having to change a culture. And boards often, particularly boards of charities, are really nervous about grants, so you have to do some of that cultural change work with the board often to get them into the place where they're ready to take that investment.
Okay, interesting. Thank you, Kate. So I'm going to open up to some open questions now for sort of 5 minutes, because we'll try and keep roughly to time, given we had a slightly later start. But I'm just going to leave with Ishita, Julius and Kate. After the sort of questions, I'm going to come back for your top 3 tips from today, whether that's about growth stages, whether that is about accessing social investment, or whether it's about how you actually do that impact measurement and evidencing piece. So I'll leave you to have a few minutes to think through there. Dren, I didn't know whether there's any sort of questions that have come through the chat, or if anybody wants to pop their hand up and sort of come in with their own question to anyone that's we've heard from today.
So I'm keeping a close eye on the chat. There's nothing so far, but we'll let you know.
Okay. Anybody got any particular questions that they'd like to sort of put to any of our speakers then? Can't see any hands up just at this moment. So I'm going to suggest that we do skip and try and keep to that time. So we'll kind of come back and do the top 3 tips, if you like. So how do we help organisations be social investment ready? How do we help them in terms of looking at that impact sort of evidencing piece? Looking at the different lifestyles, and it could be about different sectors. So as I say, we've got sort of Kate a little bit more on the B2B sort of side of things, and Julius a little bit more of a B2C based social enterprise. So Ishita, could I perhaps come to you first? Your top 3 tips.
Yeah, of course. So my number 1 tip would be to recognise social investment as one tool in your toolbox. That it is a toolbox, and there are lots of other tools out there. And Julius touched upon this on timing. If it's the right timing, you've got a revenue stream, you've got a clear purpose, you think that you could go for it. then definitely remember that it is one of the tools in your toolbox. The second one for me is that honesty is always the best policy. So just having really honest, open conversations when you connect with investors about what it is that you need and what it is that you are looking for. We always say that finding the right investor is a bit like dating. Like, there is a matchmaking process. There's a process of like figuring out whether your values and your needs align and whether it's the right fit. And quite often social investment is something you pay back over a period of many years. So it's a long-term relationship that you're looking to build. And just definitely keeping that in mind. And the final one is absolutely go check out Good Finance, especially the investor directory and the Is It Right For Us diagnostic tool, because those things will give you an indication of what type of social investment, and then you can kind of go and search for investors. Very good like starting place for that journey of if you think that investment could.
So you can kind of use that as an exploratory tool before sort of actually making a commitment, but also actually, you know, speak to people at Good Finance, people like yourself, that just in terms of a sort of a first dip your toe in the water to saying, this is my business, this is what I'm looking for, I'm not quite sure how to go about it. They can have that sort of approach conversation with you.
Yeah, absolutely. We're always kind of, you know, happy for people to get in touch and reach out to us, and we're always trying to put out helpful things on our socials as well. So yeah, definitely use it as a place to explore and a place to learn. And even if you go on there and learn that social investment is not right for you, that's still a win, I think, to know that it's not the right tool for you at any given option, but just to consider it if it could be.
Okay, Kate, you were nodding quite vigorously then, so I'm going to, sorry, that was a sort of like a flag to me to go to Kate next, ask her for the top 3 tips.
I'm nodding all the time. Well, those are brilliant. We when we start with early stage social entrepreneurs, I come back to something called the hedgehog model. If you've ever read Jim Collins' Good to Great book, and there's a book for the social sector, he talks about what you're passionate about, what you can be the best at doing, and then how you actually have a resource engine that drives the economic engine that drives what you want to achieve. So being very clear about, we haven't used the word theory of change before, but your kind of social impact. So what are the outcomes you're trying to achieve? The outcomes matrix on the Good Finance website is brilliant, but you've got to have started with understanding what difference you're trying to make, the outcome you want to get to, and why what you're doing is the best way to achieve that. Now, that may or may not relate directly to your business model, so understanding a bit about the different business models that are around for social enterprise, I think, is important too. So that's the piece of then being able to demonstrate that you can repay that money. And then you've got to be able to tell your story. You've got to be able to, whether that's filling a form in, whether that's getting in front of actual investors if you're pitching, and there are some angel investor groups around for social enterprise, not that many, you could do with more, but that's another model. So just being able to really be passionate about what you're doing, but have the evidence that supports it, both in impact and in financial savvy, is absolutely right. And I suppose one last little thing, and Julius already said it, is don't undercapitalize what you're trying, take enough, make sure you've got plenty of money. So build those contingencies in. Social investors are brilliant because they give you breathing space if things start to wobble. That's where they're not like your conventional kind of hard-nosed banks and things that might just swipe your property away from you. They will stick with you through hard times. And that's really important because that's the relational thing again. So they might well give you a repayment holiday if things are tough for a bit. They might well give you time to actually get a property repaired before it starts to earn income, before you repay either capital or interest. So that's why social investment is really important. That's what Big Society Capital has brought in terms of some new money for the sector that isn't like the hard-nosed banks.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think from my marketing background, I would say, yes, we collectively as a sector, telling our story is so important. We focus often on the external. I've got a product, Julius, if I can say, I've got coffee beans, I need to sell them. That's what I need to focus. But actually the story behind our community of benefit, that social impact, and how that social impact actually creates transformational change for our community of benefit. And I think probably perhaps Julius, the way that you've been able to articulate that in your social impact statements through that process of accreditation and actually having to think about it, that's kind of been a little bit beneficial, I would say, to from what you've said before about going through the experience of the mark and getting your story out there through crowdfunding. We things don't work, we learn, don't we? And actually when they do work, we go, need to do more of that. So
yeah,
feed into your top 3 tips.
Yeah, I think that feeds perfectly into kind of what I was going to say as well, in terms of being able to communicate what it is that you do and the story. Because I think the first step for that is that you can understand it and you're honest with the impact that you are having, maybe the impact that you're not having, or where you want to improve on, and just being super honest and realistic with yourself about what your impact is and what you need in the stage that you're at as a business. I would say that would be kind of my first one, is just to spend that time, that reflection time. And if you can, and it's super hard when you're just in it every day, but try to take a step back and kind of emotionlessly looking at what you're doing, and that's going to help identify the best sources of funding for you and what's good for you at kind of that time. And I think secondly, kind of piggybacking on what Kate was saying earlier again about being social, and just talking to people. And I think in terms of the confidence thing as well, for me, I totally found that the more I would speak to people about what my plans were and what we were trying to do, and they wouldn't respond to me and tell me that I'm crazy and don't know what I'm talking about, that that gave me confidence that, oh yeah, maybe I do know what I'm talking about. This is this does make sense and whatever. But then also I think people are generally always willing to have a quick 10, 15, 20-minute conversation, and just having those and learning from what people have done well, what they felt they've done well, and just learning from that kind of process. And then I think lastly for me, just again talking about kind of it being the right timing, is just, I think I'd say prioritizing yourself and prioritizing your mind, and not overworking yourself and and getting to a stage where you're at burnout. Because I feel like as social entrepreneurs, we're leading the organization, your value is really determined by how good you can be and feeling like and performing to the best of your ability. And I think it's really easy to try to kind of take off too much, try and do too many things at the same time. And so just prioritizing yourself and making sure that it is the right timing, and finding a way that works obviously for your organization and what you're trying to achieve, but also works for you personally, so that you can actually activate that or realize those goals to the best of your ability.
Thank you. Yeah, brilliant. Well, I'm going to prioritize myself by going online after we've finished this and ordering some of your coffee, being the bit of a coffee fiend that I am. I'd like to really thank everybody for attending today, for speaking today. Just before we all go, if it's okay with everybody, I'd love Dren to just be able to sort of get a screen capture. So feel free to, do the sort of handshake, celebration, a bit of a wave, raise your coffee cup. So Dren, if you're okay to do a quick screen grab as part of our thanks for everybody coming along today.
Sounds great. Yeah. I'll do a countdown so everyone's
Yay.
ready. 3, 2,
3, 2, 1, wave. Brilliant. A big thank you to our speakers. I know everybody has a busy day, but I really, I've learned a lot about social investment, and also kind of that entrepreneurial thinking. I know Marianne was here from Coventry University Social Enterprise KIC, the hub that works with an actor student. So I'm sure there's a great connection there as well. And I just think it's fabulous to see more and more young people and community groups moving into the social enterprise sector, becoming sustainable. And we can only do that if we actually go through that life cycling, look at how we protect ourselves, our own well-being, so that we can actually give out to our community of benefit. And we can do that more and more as we scale and grow. So a big thank you to everybody. Have a fabulous day. There's a bit of spring sunshine out there. So go enjoy some vitamin D, and we'll look forward to seeing you all for our next coffee morning session, which will be in May. So until then, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sally, for great
Everyone.
facilitation. Thank you.
Very
Thank
kind.
you.
Thank you.
Good to see everyone.
Thanks, bye.